Hello, everyone. Hello. Okay, I'm going to welcome to Frederick Johnson in Conversation. I am going to invite our guest, Blaine Sparks-Teamer. Give me just a sec here. Okay, Mr. Teamer. Let's see. Will be with us shortly. And let me just make sure we're all good here and good to go. Okay, awesome. Hello, I see Scarlett Sobrani. Welcome. I see Sheree Adams. How are you doing? Welcome to Frederick Johnson in Conversation. And we are waiting for Mr. Sparks-Teamer to join us any moment now. Thank you guys for being here. Hi. Thanks for being here. Okay, well, I think, I see Ms. Rachel in Providence, Rhode Island. How are you doing? Hello to Scarlett. How are you? Awesome. Okay, and hold for 1 sec here. We are going to get Blaine Sparks-Teamer here, you guys. Hang on really quick. I'm going to send another request for him to join us. I think we're just getting our little, oh my God.
I made it. Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's so good to see you. It's so good to have you here. I see there's some kind of like, are you outside? I see some beautiful like plant life in the background, or is that?
Yes, this is a real plant in the back. Okay. I wanted to have some color against the white wall.
Well, it looks great. It looks great. We've got a lot of people coming into the room. So before we really get into conversation, I just want to give you a proper introduction, Blaine, and just welcome you to the show. Everyone that's come in, thank you all for being here. Welcome to Frederick Johnson in Conversation. I'm your host, Frederick Johnson, and my guest today, Blaine Sparks-Teamer, is a playwright, novelist, and co-host of the Afro-Existential Podcast. His plays includes #Box Seats, a Los Angeles story, Dead Weight, a journey into Afro-Existentialism, and Pandora's Trunk. His work has been produced and or developed by New York Theater Workshop, National Black Theater, the Los Angeles Theater Center, Directors Lab West, the National Black Theater Festival, and Capitol Repertory Theater's The Next Act New Play Summit. He is a member of the Playwright Center and alumni of LATC'S Wordsmiths. Blaine's debut novel is entitled Shady, a novel, and we're going to get into everything. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Blaine Sparks-Teamer.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So, Blaine, my first question. First, I want to say thank you for all the work you've done. I've spent the past couple of weeks immersed in the brilliance of your writing and your humor, and I've listened to your audio play, which we definitely will be discussing. Looking forward to that. Read your 2 other plays, read your novel, and listened to every episode of the Afro-Existential Podcast. So
that's more than I've done. I haven't done half of those things yet.
So thank you for the work you've done. So my first question is, when did you start writing, and what were you writing about?
The first thing I remember writing was it was my autobiography in 3rd grade for a book writing contest, and I think I came in like 3rd place, and it was called Baby Talk.
Okay.
So that was the first big thing. Okay. And then I wrote something again in like 5th grade, and I think I came in like 1st place.
Okay.
And so I think I've always just enjoyed telling stories through writing. And then probably it kicked back off some point in college.
So when did you know you wanted to write professionally? Like, I want to do this for a living. When did you know that? And how did you even go about pursuing that?
It was probably my senior year at Penn State, and I had taken an elective course. and it was on the writings of Toni Morrison and Zora Neale Hurston,
Mhm.
who I had never heard of Zora Neale Hurston before. And we read all of their works at that period of time. And that just really kind of just opened me up, because she gathered language and like documented the language of the people of that particular time in like the 30s and 40s. And I was like, oh, I just loved it. And I wanted, it was like, oh, she was an anthropologist, as well as a novelist and a playwright.
Mm-hmm.
And that just really kind of opened me up of like, oh, I want to do that too. I want to capture the language that's around me that I'm hearing and telling those stories. And at that particular time, I had another English professor who, I think it's a short story that's in Shady. It's the bar scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a short piece that I had written and turned in. And she, at that time, wanted to connect me with her agents, with her literary agent. And I really didn't have a concept of what that was or what that was about at that moment. But that was probably the first inkling of it. And then
Mm-hmm.
after graduation, I came to LA, and there were just opportunities to collaborate with other artists. And so I just started writing
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
whenever I had the opportunity to kind of do something.
So you started writing, and later in now living in Los Angeles, you did go on to get a master's degree in
Yes.
psychology with an
Yes.
emphasis in community psychology, which I had not heard of before. So what is community psychology, and then how did that specific education inform your writing?
Community psychology is, you can look at it as psychology for community versus the individual. So you really look at what are the problems a community are having and helping them define what those issues are for themselves. And then helping them come up with a solution. So if you're doing individual therapy, it's never really about you telling the client what to do.
Mm-hmm.
You're really kind of helping them figure out what their problems are, and then discussing with them how they can come up with the solution or what would be the best solution for them. So community
Mm-hmm.
psych is looking at that for a broader community. And it really informs everything that I do in my writing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm usually looking at a problem that I'm kind of facing or dealing with, or something that really gets my goat up or whatever. And I write about it, and then I usually try to have like use that piece as a springboard for bigger conversations, or
Mm-hmm.
like an entryway into the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And also thinking about what resources that are around me that I have access to, and what other artists are kind of needing to do, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to collaborate with them to kind of help them kind of solve their issues of kind of wanting to create
Mm-hmm.
art as well. So I've been really
Yes.
fortunate to work around some really great friends and artists who wanted to direct, or
Mm-hmm.
wanted to produce, or do things, and didn't have access to it. And
Mm-hmm.
so we kind of collaborated and worked together to create something.
Yes. Yes. So before we get into the plays, I want to ask you too. You've written a novel, you've written plays. Um, is there a difference for you for novel writing and playwriting? What is there a difference in that creative process? Had you always done both?
Yeah, it's like you got to dance, you got to tap dance, you got to sing, you got to give them rest. You just try everything.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I think I had written short stories first. Yeah, I think I always just did both. And I would say the difference is that if I'm trying to write a novel, for me, I'm using one voice, and that voice is going to hopefully has to be entertaining enough to carry the reader through like 300 or 200 pages,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a play, it's going to be multiple voices, and they're each telling their own story,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, you know, one god versus like Greek mythology when there are many gods, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's those are the differences, and those are the two biggest. I think the similarity is that I really work on a really strong outline, and like that is, it's so kind of methodical and like structured, and I have to do that before I can even start about actually writing either one.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people don't think about how important the outline is,
mm-hmm.
and the structure. And so you have something, you know, you end up something with that's like a script that's 5,000 pages.
Right.
You know, versus right. Like, okay, it has to be this set number, and what has to happen in each particular segment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So that importance of that structure. So we'll go back to the novel, because I think the novel preceded the plays. So I believe the three plays, the novel came before the three plays. So am I right about that?
I'm trying to think the order. It's
all okay, but I do want to go back to the novel, but what's most current and most present is the audio play. So there's the audio play Dead Weight, which is part of the Afro-Existential Podcast.
Correct.
So we'll talk about the podcast first. So this is, to everyone who has not experienced the Afro-Existential Podcast yet, I hope that you will be experiencing it begin to experience as soon as this interview is over. It's a fabulous podcast. This podcast launched during this pandemic time. Was that the plan? Did you plan on doing a podcast before? Did it just kind of end up, how did that timing happen, and how was it born?
Never listened to podcasts, never thought about doing a podcast. Don't like speaking publicly. I'm very uncomfortable with the whole, never crossed my mind. So how did it come about? I was not able to get produced as a playwright. And, you know, you try to figure out different things that you can do. And at I think around 2018, there was going to be a reading of Dead Weight in New York. And it was going to be via a live reading in front of an audience, and to go out on a podcast. And so when we came back from New York, I spoke with my friend Indira, who is my partner and my muse and my friend. And I said, oh my gosh, this is what they did in New York. And, you know, we can do the same thing here. And, you know, we can do these plays, because it was called the Parsnip Ship, and they do a play reading every month. And then when I sat down and thought about how much work that would take, I got really tired, and it's like, oh, we can't, and you're too busy, I'm too tired, we can't do it. And so about a year later, she came back and she said, I have a great idea. Why don't we do Dead Weight in a recording, and we can do a podcast? And so she circled back like a year later, and, you know, we were trying to find a space and where we could record it. And then that fell into place. And she organized an amazing group of actors / friends to come together to do a recording in the studio. It went smoothly. It was beautiful. Everybody was fantastic. And so that was January 2020.
Okay.
And I think we were like it was very organic. I think we were trying to talk about, okay, we would record it, and we would have this play, and that we could do it as a podcast. But I think we knew that wasn't going to be enough just to have this play. Like, what was going to make a fuller podcast? And so I started developing, her and I, the Afro-Existential elements of it, where we would present the play in segments. And then we would have discussions with the cast members and different people about particular elements in the play, as well as the Afro-Existential element.
So, Blaine, explain to us, because the podcast is called the Afro-Existential Podcast, because this was a new, I'm assuming you and Durer, you guys coined this term together, if not individually. It was a new term for me. So when I heard that, I kind of thought about like objectivism. Like I thought about these different movements I've known of, over the years, at the movement of like Afro-Existentialism. So what is Afro-Existentialism? And then you also talk about an Afro-Existential crisis as well. So what is the Afro-Existentialism and what is the Afro-Existential crisis?
Well, I wrote the play Dead Weight, and it's based on a French existential play by a philosopher, playwright named Jean-Paul Sartre. Mm-hmm. And it's a play that I had loved since I was a kid. And I had been for years, sometimes like a story just kind of sticks with you. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I was trying to figure out how I would do my own version of it. And I had an idea, but I could never figure out how to fully execute it because it was it was 3 stories versus the one that I ended up telling.
Okay.
And so, but it stuck with me. And then finally I just said, Blaine, why don't you just tell one story? Like, why don't you just start with that? And so I called it Dead Weight. And it's a crazy story about the Afro-Existential part, but I came up with the term Afro-Existentialism. Okay. And part of that was out of what I realized is that, a lot of philosophers are European. Mm-hmm. And so when they come up with philosophies, a lot of times marginalized people aren't in their peripheral view or any type of view. Mm-hmm. And so when I began to look more into the philosophy of existentialism, one of the components did not ring true for me. And it was that you have control over your life in all parts. Like you are responsible and you have control over what happens to you. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the first thing I thought about was like slaves. And it was like, well, how did they have control over their lives? And I thought about, when the term came up again, because Kierkegaard was an older philosopher, but Sartre kind of popularized it. And in France, around the 40s, and at that time, women weren't allowed to vote in France, like in the 40s and 50s. And so I thought, okay, here's a man that's coming up with this philosophy that's saying that you have control, but is not really taking into consideration that half the population can't even vote. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so I wanted to come up with a term that spoke to me, that was more useful for me, and that was, I called it Afro-Existentialism. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the basic premise of it is that, Sartre talks about free will, and that we all have free will. And my belief is that free will is not the sole determining factor in a person's development. And you need to factor in conscious and unconscious biases. Mm-hmm. So that was one. Biases have always existed against the disenfranchised, and no further evidence or explanation is required for the privileged. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then strategize your life with this evidence in mind to avoid getting stuck in the cycle of rage. Yeah. Which Dead Weight really speaks to. I think there's even a line in the audio play where I think the main character talks about, where there's a conversation about free will. I think it's toward the end, and she's saying something like, there is no free will, or something like that. Yeah, so, right. And then bias is also mentioned as well, which I want to go, before we get into the play, I could not mention your partner, your muse, your friend, Indira G. Gibson, because she not only stars in the play and as the mother Georgina, she also directs the play. So before we really kind of get into the play itself, how did you two come to collaborate? she reminded me that, so years ago when Pandora, there's a play that I wrote called Pandora's Trunk, and that was about to be put on, and there were two actresses in the part, and Indira, she was like, you don't remember this, but I was the understudy. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, yeah. She goes, and I don't understudy for anybody.
Yeah.
She goes, if I have to understudy, I just feel like I'm not working hard enough and I need to work harder. But she said, I loved the words and the writing so much. And I just felt like I just needed to be the understudy to learn those words. And so yada, yada, yada. Those two actresses dropped out, and she took one of the roles, and then eventually she became the lead role over time when it was done after that. And so we just remained friends since then, and it's like she's like one of those people that I feel really understands my work and is I write things with her in mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we've stayed connected, and we worked on stuff over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And then so of course when this opportunity happened, she was like, oh, let's try doing this. And she had always wanted to do, she loves podcasts.
Okay.
So for her, I guess the community like element is that she wanted to do a podcast, but she didn't want it to be just about fluff or nothing. She wanted it to actually be about something.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I presented her the idea, the Afro-Existential idea, she was like, oh my gosh, like I get it,
Yeah.
And so we just, from that point on, she just kept on like pushing me to develop it.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that, we developed the concept of what the podcast was going to look like, and worked on that. So that's how that collaboration came together.
Dead Weight, which she directs and stars in, about this very unique family we're going to discuss, is part of I don't know if I would call it a category, but one of the spaces in the podcast, which is Theater in the Black. So it's part of the Theater in the Black. So just tell everyone what Theater in the Black is, and in the host, Alistair Justin Black. Who is Alistair Justin Black? The mysterious Alistair Justin Black.
The mysterious Alistair Justin Black. Well, there's a great episode. It's the episode that's called Afro-X, introducing Alistair Justin Black. So you get a whole backstory on who he is. But we modeled, or I wanted to model the play after radio plays of like the 1940s and 50s. And they always had often they had a host who would kind of introduce you to like, welcome to so-and-so and so-and-so. Or after that, when it became television, you had like your Alfred Hitchcock presents, and he would come on and kind of set up what the story was going to be. And then I think it was Alistair Cook did Masterpiece Theater, which was the same thing.
Theater,
so there was this person that came on and said, this is what the story's about. This is what's, kind of leading you into it. And then kind of at the end kind of brings you out of it. And so I think what was interesting is that a play is meant to be seen. Mm-hmm. And there's all these elements that are really kind of for the eye as well as for the ear. But when you're switching it over to audio, there are certain things that have to be described or said or kind of set up. Mm-hmm. And so he helped with that because it had to slightly be altered to kind of work as an audio play.
Right. He kind of helps navigate the story.
He takes you through the whole, right.
He takes you through, and as people will see when they experience the podcast, the vignettes with Alistair really kind of continue to kind of keep the story going, kind of remind you where you're at, give you a little recap about what happened in the last episode. Right. So this is a story, as you all describe it on the podcast site, a story about an all-American family. So tell us about this family.
The family is the Mulligan family, and I say that, how do I say, anywhere you go in the world, there's a place where people on their way up cross paths with people on their way down.
Okay.
And so, and so they live in an apartment building that is that cross place. And they were very affluent at one time, and they lived in Hancock Park.
Mhm.
And Mrs. Mulligan's father was an architect who had built this beautiful home in Hancock Park that she inherited. And for whatever reasons, as time went by, they lost the house.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so now they've kind of gone down quite a bit. Now they're kind of like in Echo Park.
Okay. They're south of Wilshire for those
Exactly.
in Los Angeles.
So far
They're south of
Right.
Wilshire. People watching that are in LA will know what that means.
Right.
So they fell from grace a little, somewhat.
They have fallen a great deal from grace.
Yeah.
And they are really trying to work their way back up that food chain. And trying to figure out how to do it. Like, how do you what are you willing to do to change your circumstance and get unstuck? So an opportunity arises that Georgina and her son are debating about whether they should actually do it.
Yeah. It's a criminal act. I'm not going to give anything away.
What's
I'm not
criminal these days? Do we know what's criminal anymore? So many things that are criminal, people don't even get in trouble for anymore.
That's true. That's true.
Right.
I'm not going to give anything away because people, when they listen to the play, they'll get the story for themselves. But I think I can say, only because this is just the setup, that this opportunity, it will be a financial benefit to a mother who desperately wants to kind of live the way she used to live.
Yes, I call them,
son.
My friend Lex reminded me, I call them trans-affluent.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. Thank you, Lex. I'm getting to trans-affluent because that's a whole story in and of itself. And then you have this son who he has his own troubles. So this is the son who is very, very much an adult. You know, he's like 30-ish. But he's kind of a loafer. He's, he kind of going from pillar to post. You know, he's been in and out of jail, or as they say, he's gone back to college, as it's described in the play. But an opportunity arises for this mother and son to come upon an amount of money that they'd be very happy to kind of get them back to the lifestyle they're accustomed to.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, though, because there is something about this where, on the surface, and this is one thing I love about your writing as well, and everything that I've read, there's always an on the surface kind of relationship that's happening that could be very kind of straight ahead, that someone can understand, oh, it's this mother and son in this codependent relationship, and the mother's trying, but underneath, there's like a whole other kind of like landscape going on, you know, where like the mother, in a lot of ways, I kind of found her, especially once you get to the end of the play, she's not the person that you think she is.
Right.
And in many ways, I kind of felt like she was getting her son to almost think that the whole thing was his idea.
Right. Well, that's what she does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Her husband says that's her superpower.
That's her, but we don't even hear that till later. We kind of learn that later.
Right.
But as it's going on, I think like kind of like on the outset, there is this sense of kind of like, oh, the mother, she just doesn't know what to do. She's baking. Oh, all of this is happening while she's baking a cake for a church function, right? But meanwhile, her son,
she's a good Christian woman. She's a good Christian woman.
She's a good Christian woman. And what I thought was interesting too, because she's one of those people that she's like, what would the Lord think? You know, she's this very good Christian woman. But I thought it was interesting that right before she kind of decides, or they decide together to do this thing,
right,
she consults the Ouija board, which I thought was interesting. Like she didn't pray about it. She didn't consult the Bible.
Right.
So it was kind of like that Ouija board consult. That was the sign. So I kind of thought that was an interesting turning point as well.
Right.
In the story. But back to trans-affluent, which please describe. I thought that's a riot. I love it. I want to start hashtagging trans-affluent.
Right. Yeah, please. Yeah,
so tell us about trans-affluent in the story.
When your lifestyle doesn't match your paycheck. So you identify as being wealthy, and but your income is otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. In this story, the son tells the mother that we're trans affluent because he says, oh, it's just like that woman who was transracial, Rachel Dolezal.
Right. So why can't we
Who,
be trans affluent?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I told a friend after reading the play, I said, oh my God, I'm reading this, I'm listening to this play. And I told her about trans affluent. And she was like, that's what we are. And I was like,
right, exactly.
Finally, there's a terminology for it. Thank you.
My mother goes, I don't identify with being poor. Like, is that bad? Like, I have no reference. I don't identify with that. So, and the guy goes, no, neither do I. Like, we're trans affluent. Just like, Rachel Dolezal is transracial. Why can't we be trans affluent?
Yes. So how did you guys do this? So here's the other interesting thing. It's so well done. The sound effects, all of there's maybe like 8 different characters. You have your main character, the mother and the son. There's the father. There's a neighbor. There's the sister. There's the sister's daughter. There's a number of different. There's people. There's also kind of like a show within a show. There's a talk shows. Right. Daytime TV talk shows, kind of a la Jerry Springer, a la Maury Povich, that are happening in the background that kind of tell their own story. The first one I thought was really interesting is all about sibling rivalry. And though it's about 2 men, I thought, it really kind of felt like it was speaking to these 2 sisters, Georgina and her sister.
Oh, yeah, it's totally like.
Yes. So I wanted to ask you from a technical standpoint, and how, and maybe this is a question for Indira, as well as a director, like, how did you guys do all of this, like from a technical standpoint, with these various actors' parts and the sound effects and how did that work?
So what Indira did, which was amazing, she is a professional actor and a writer as well. So she coordinated the actors coming in. So we had a short amount of time, and she had everybody come in on a schedule on a Sunday.
Okay.
And so she had everybody didn't do their parts together. I think most of the people had the opportunity to act with the other person in the scene, but she coordinated all of that. And so at the end of it, what we had was the audio, the vocal. And the intention was that she was going to edit it. And because of her schedule, she was not able to do that. And so I'm not that computer literate or savvy, like, at all. As getting on Instagram to do this was difficult. But I said, well, I think I started collecting sound effects. I went through it and I was going through all of the sound effects. So I said, well, I'll start collecting those until she's ready to do the edit. And then I think she got on another gig. And so ultimately I said, well, is it okay if I try to edit it? And so I looked at different programs. I spoke to my friend Lex, and that was a big help, who guided me through some things. And I found different programs and realized that my computer was not big or strong enough. So everything was crashing. Like, I would edit something and it would crash.
Oh, God.
I would edit and I would lose whole pieces of it. And I couldn't understand it. And it was because the audio clips were huge. And I think I was doing it on an iPad at some point. So I think I went through 4 laptops during the process. But ultimately, when I finally I think by the time I got the one I have now, which had enough power, I had pretty much edited it in a program called Foundation.
Okay.
And then added in all the sound effects and cues. And because we were at that time, we were doing them in segments. I think by the time we started the first one, I had edited all of the pieces together with the sound and the music and blah, 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 blah.
Well, it's great. And you really, and especially knowing that your inspiration was kind of hearkening back to the radio plays in the 1940s, I thought you guys really nailed it because it's evoking that spirit. And and it's still fresh, it's contemporary, it's a story of today, but there
Right.
is like that nostalgia factor and kind of you know, undergirding there too. There's another program in the podcast I want to talk about called Creating Art in Crisis.
Right.
And this is described as an exploration and sharing of how during these unprecedented times are affecting creativity and how artists and art organizations are processing it all and finding solutions to their creative efforts to get them to the next level. You've interviewed some incredible creative leaders from organizations like Pasadena Playhouse, City Ballet of Los Angeles, LA Writers Center, among many other creatives. So, you know, how was this idea born for Creating Art in Crisis series?
We had interviewed everybody from the play, and we were trying to figure out this is the other thing. So I think we had done we had put up maybe the second episode, and we were contacted by the Broadway Podcast Network. And the Broadway Podcast Network is kind of this one platform of all podcasts dealing with theater. And they asked if we wanted to join their platform. And we said yes, we were honored. And when we finished the cycle, we rebooted up back on Broadway Podcast Network. And so we had to think about what we were going to do next. And because of the pandemic, because of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, you know, all of these crises that were going on, we were really trying to figure out what to do next podcast-wise. And so we thought about, and also Indira was, her crisis was, as an artist, you know, what should she be doing? And it felt like she, you know, either needed to be protesting or like she was like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing in all of this. You know? And so we came up with this idea to kind of talk to other artists and kind of see what they were going through during this time. And not to just like kvetch and complain and like, oh, woe is me, but from a community psych aspect of like, how are they getting through it? What tools are they using? What have they come up with? What has their insight been? And sharing that with people who would listen to the podcast. Yeah. And we kicked it off with a wonderful therapist named Melanie Stitt, out of Philadelphia. Woo, 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 our favorite place. I'm from Philadelphia. And so I wanted her to talk about, to kind of demystify what therapy is and to explain the process of how one finds a therapist and what to expect when they first start. And so that's how we wanted to kick it off with like a therapeutic angle. Because everybody, you know, if you think about before the election was happening, like we were all just going through this angst. You know? And so she kicked it off and she was wonderful. And I felt like she makes it very, you know, she makes it feel very accessible to be able to access therapy, which is so important. And
I thought it set a really nice, because I listened to everything chronologically for the podcast. So I didn't go to different pieces. I mean, I literally from the beginning, I kind of wanted to just hear the whole journey of the podcast. So I knew that the audio play came first. But it's an interesting stage that she set, because there is this through line across these organizations. And it's interesting because you're speaking to folks that are perhaps who they're servicing at-risk youth, or they're servicing, you know, a very specific type of community, providing, you know, ballet for, you know, like little girls to be able to take for you know, a sliding scale or something like that. And then you got Pasadena Playhouse, you got all these different folks. And what was interesting is that everyone kind of had to, there was this kind of something that was a universal theme for all of those organizations, and how they had to really pivot, or how
Right.
they had to reimagine how they were going to educate, how were they going to engage the community, how they were going to entertain. So it's a wonderful series that I know you guys did an 8-episode series. So I hope you guys will come back with that series as well, because that was a good one. Or you know, before we go, we're going to talk about what's coming next, because I want it from the podcast. But I want to talk about Shady in our last. This time it's going way too fast for me. I'm already like, I want a part 2, because we already have like 20 minutes left, and I want to touch on at least 3 more things. But I want to talk about Shady, which is available. Anyone go to Amazon.com and enter in Shady Blaine Teamer and buy the book Shady. It is a page turner. It's one of the funniest things I've ever read. And again, kind of like what I was saying about your work earlier, you write comedy so well, but there's drama, sometimes almost tragedy, that's really kind of underneath what's going on. So just give people kind of like a quick synopsis of what Shady is about.
Shady is about 3 women, African-American poor women, who have been friends since childhood. And now they are adults. And, you know, there's this triangle, there's this dynamic between, you know, if you're in a tight group of friends, you know, like there's a character, like there's the one person that's always in trouble, there's the one person that is the bossy, you know, there's always these particular guys. So it's this triangle, and it's the one who always gets in trouble. She has gotten herself into like really, really hot water the night before this big bingo tournament that everybody in the Black community is going to be at. It's like, because they're giving away a car.
And it's a small town, just so people know. It's Shady Grove, South Carolina.
It's in South, like a small town in South Carolina.
Yeah.
So a country town.
In 1974.
In the 70s, yeah.
Yeah.
And she, you know, she's expecting her friends, you know, these are her girls, these are, you know, ride or die girls, to kind of help her get out of this. This is like the worst predicament that she has gotten into, like the worst one. And so it is the journey of them trying to help her get out of this, solve this problem, and get to the bingo tournament that night. Because you got every priority straight.
Yeah. they make it to the bingo tournament. But yeah, without a lot of drama. Can I read one line?
Sure, please.
Because this kind of, so this is the book, you guys. You're going to go to Amazon and get this book, Shady. So there's this, let me see if I can find this. I think because this kind of says a lot about what's going on. Let me find it here. Oh yeah, this is on page 139. So this is the character Effie. This is the one that's always in trouble. It's these 3 friends, Safrania, Effie, and Tweety. And so this is kind of after the drama, or, you know, in the midst of it, but a lot has happened in this day leading up to this bingo tournament. So page 139, but utter fatigue wrapped around Effie's rain-soaked little body. She knew that once her skull hit that pillow, she was going to sleep like a log. It had been a long 24 hours for Effie. She'd had sex, got beat, killed a man, helped organize a plot to get rid of a dead body, broke into a business, tried twice to burn a body, won a Cadillac, gave it away, broke into another business, and threw a man into a sausage vat. She thought about it all and giggled to herself. You got to hand it to a hoe that can handle her business. This book is hilarious. I stopped at so many points in this book, and I was like, no, he did not. No, he did not. Like, I just had to like go back and read. I was like, did I read what I just read? But that just to kind of give you like a little inkling of all of the drama that's involved in this story.
Hours. That was just the 24 hours. Yeah.
That was just the 24 hours. But I wanted to ask, because we're in this small town in South Carolina. There's a vernacular that these characters speak with, these 3 women, and I'm assuming, you know, whoever is kind of like locally to that area, but because we hear a lot of you know, dialogue from these particular 3 characters, there's a very, very specific way that they speak. And I wanted to ask you, Blaine, I don't know, like, did you make that up? Like, who are these women? Did you know these women? Are there fabrications? Were these women in your family? You kind of pattern this afterwards? Because it's just so uniquely and specifically drawn. I wanted to know where did these women come from?
Well, I was curious about like what stood out? Like what did you hear, or what are you referring, what
Well, okay, I'll
hearing?
put it this way. I've never been to South Carolina, so I don't know. I may go to South Carolina, maybe back in the 70s, people would have been talking like that. But I just thought like it was very much like people from a certain place that were speaking a certain kind of way, and they all had this certain kind of, like, they probably wouldn't have sounded like that if they were from Los Angeles, you know, like they were. Right. So I guess I was just wondering, like, I felt like, what I'm saying is I felt like I really knew these women, like I knew them well.
Right.
Like, right. And I just wonder, like, if these were people that was these characters that you kind of knew in some way, that you, kind of patterned the Sophronia Tweet and Effie after, or did you really just kind of make these women up?
I think a little bit of both. I think
okay.
We do know those women.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, but we don't get to see them, yeah, or hear them in literature and art. And to go back to the Zora Neale Hurston thing, and you know, I really wanted to kind of capture, you know, we have a certain way that we communicate in private that is for us, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, you know, mm-hmm. And I think that's why it's so kind of familiar, and we're mm-hmm. not always used to kind of seeing. And I remember years ago, I was in Brixton in England, and I was walking, you know, Brixton then was kind of rough, you know, mm-hmm. and I was walking behind these two young British girls, and they were talking in a British accent, but it was very Black, like we talk. Mm-hmm, like mm-hmm. There's like a rhythm to it, and there's a feel to it, and it's mm-hmm. like it just felt, it's like universal. And I spoke to a woman from South Africa, and she had this, you know, she related to it. And so I think it's just, first of all, I think that for Black people, we deal with so much tragedy so often that it kind of almost like water off a duck's back, mm-hmm. you know? Yeah. And so it's almost like, it's like when someone falls and you laugh instinctively, mm-hmm. you know, and it's like, mm-hmm. once you find out that they're not hurt, you know, there's always going to be someone in your family that like blows it up bigger and keeps on talking about it year after year. Yeah. You know, I remember when Aunt Sally fell down the steps and
let me tell you, I went to a house party. This was just maybe, I don't know, 7-8 years ago. I went to a house party with a lot of older relatives. It was at a great aunt's house, and it's almost kind of like she still throws these crazy kind of Friday night house parties with the Ritz and the dip on the table, and and all the liquor and the basement, and they're playing all the 70s jams and everything, right? And I remember this one aunt who was 85 at the time, and she was in like a mink jacket, some hot pants, and some stiletto heels. And she and I remember we were dancing, I think, to Shaka Khan, "Do You Love What You Feel?" or whatever, you know, and she fell. And like, I was the one who was the most upset. And the other girl, she's like, "Get up. She's all right. Get up." You know, it was like,
she always falling.
She's always falling. And I just thought, and you know what? She got back up like it was nothing and kept on dancing.
Right.
And that's exactly what these three women,
that's like Effie and Tweet. Right.
Exactly. And so that's why, like, I felt like instantly, I was like, I know these women. And that's why I thought it's so specific, like what you captured. The other thing I love about this story too is that I love it when something has me rooting for the criminals to get away with it. You know what I mean? I love that, because I feel like the writer has so made you empathize with the characters that, like,
it doesn't even seem like a crime.
I want them to get away with it. I actually kind of see, going back to what you're saying about invisibility. Right. These are when they kind of get away with it because they aren't being seen. They're invisible. Like, they aren't being seen. And so what happens is that like I found myself as I was reading it that, you know what, I thought this is the best case scenario. Like what they're doing to get out of their situation because of the oppression that they've been
Right.
in for so many years, especially at
Right.
the hand of the person that is the quote unquote victim in the story. I just kind of thought to myself, you know what, this thing they're doing that's crazy, that's criminal, is probably their best shot. And what I found interesting is I kind of thought the story was going in that direction. And what ends up happening is that they all have like their own personal awakenings. Like in this, they all have these, and I didn't even see that coming. Like I thought like they're going to get away with it. Yay. And I was excited for that. But then they end up having their own, I don't know, personal awakening is the best way I could describe it. They grow. You know,
Right.
these women almost grow up. These grown-up
Right.
women kind of grow up in these unexpected ways
Right.
through the very same kind of tragedy that's imprisoned them in many ways for
Right.
most of their
Right.
life.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And
It's
it's
a
the thing
beautiful
too,
story.
I think about the family that we're born into, also versus the family that we create or the people that we choose to be around, and there's another family that's in the story that is, a traditional family, and they cannot work together at all to get anything done.
Yeah, at all.
And then you have these like, forgotten, overlooked older women, and they are really, they talk to each other horribly,
Yeah.
but they're really like, they have each other's back.
Yeah.
And they're like really kind of that ride or die friend that you really
Yes.
hope that you have in a crisis.
Yes. Yes.
And so I think that, so often I would see movies and there would be like the Black Maid, or like, the butterfly. Like I wanted to know like where Butterfly McQueen was going, and like Gone with the Wind after.
Yeah.
I was interested in those characters.
When she went home, what was her story?
Exactly.
When she left, I almost said South Fork, not South Fork, Tara.
Right.
South
What
Fork
was she
in
doing?
Dallas.
Like, who did she hang out with? Who were friends? Right.
When she left Tara. Yeah, exactly. No, I get what you're saying. In these last 10 minutes, I want to quickly touch on your two other plays, hashtag Box Seats, A Los Angeles Story, and Pandora's Trunk, which I believe are set to become audio plays on the Afro-Existential Podcast.
That is our hope and our intention. So we hope to do Pandora's Trunk next because of COVID, and it's a 2-person piece, and we don't really necessarily have to be in a studio to do it.
Right.
But it's a piece that, once again, I have to really kind of think of how to reconfigure it for audio.
Well, I wish we did, like I said, I know we need a part 2 because Pandora's Trunk, that's an incredible story in and of itself. Now, I know you did a production of it at Los Angeles Theater Center, or now with Kim Fields. Kim Fields, who a lot of us grew up with, Tootie on Facts of Life, and her later sitcom, Living Single.
Right.
So what was it like working with Kim Fields and watching this actress bring your words to life?
It was great. At that point, like I said, there were the 2 other actors, another well-known actress who dropped out at the last minute. And so what was amazing about Kim Fields is that she came in, I think I'm going to say 4 days.
Wow.
Prior. And she learned the role, and Indira stepped into the second part. And so they did that together. And so I'm always amazed at the artist's technique. And I just like to watch the process of how they do that work, And then we were going to the National Black Theater Festival later on, which is in North Carolina, and Kim couldn't do it. So Indira took the lead, and then the amazing, legendary, Tony Award-winning Tanya Pinkin
I was going to
came
mention
in.
Tanya Pinkins, yes.
And she was, at that time, she had already won the Tony for Jelly's Last Jam, and she was starting a new play that she was in rehearsals for called Caroline or Change.
Yes, which was huge. Yes.
Which was huge. And so she was like, this was like a little side thing that she was doing, our little play.
Yeah.
But she really wanted to go to this festival and be a part of this Black festival, which is huge.
Yeah.
And so she took the second part. And then, you know, once again, we remained friends since then. So we stay connected.
And she's also a subject of one of the interviews when folks get into the Afro-Existential Podcast. Tanya Pinkins is one of your interviewees.
Yeah, so she talks about
podcast.
nuisance value,
Yeah,
knowing what your nuisance value is. Yeah,
yes, which was, I needed to hear that. I learned so much in this podcast because I was like, Frederick, you need to know what your nuisance value is. So yeah. I really appreciate it. She's fabulous. I want to touch on, you also got to work with Frances Fisher, who we know from the films, you know, Unforgiven, House of Sand and Fog. I mean, a lot of Academy nominated films Frances Fisher has been in. She starred in the lead when you did a production at the Renberg of #Box Seats, a Los Angeles Story. She played that role. So what was it like? Because that's, you know, Frances Fisher. I mean, she's amazing. What was it like working with her and seeing her deliver the lines that you've written?
It was absolutely fantastic, because I think what happens a lot of times with my writing is that, you know, I see people for like who they are, and I want for them to kind of be able to work in their full capacity. And you know, I see older people that are, you know, that play is about, you know, a set of older parents who are like still hot and sexy and attract, you know, like hot, you know, and they're in their late 50s, you know, so they're not like grandma and grandpa. They're like, and a lot of times parents are done in these tropes.
Yeah.
And so I really just wanted to kind of shatter that. So I had in my mind, you know, LA is a town full of women over 45, 50 who are like killing it, you know, but I think a lot of times, sometimes people are so not used to seeing that role.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happened with a lot of stuff, a lot of characters in the play, where it's like, they're not, they don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, just do yourself. Like, just do you and read the lines. And so I remember she came in and she had on this really hot, like, biker outfit, like a leather jacket, these like tight, she looked fantastic. And, you know, she's reading the part and she's doing something different. She's like trying to do like because it's kind of based on the Philadelphia story. So this is an LA story. And so she's kind of doing like Katharine Hepburn thing.
Because it's a screwball comedy.
Because it's a screwball comedy. Yeah. And so at some point it clicks to her who this is. Yeah. And her and the actor playing the father, like they fall into it. And it was really kind of the first time seeing those two parts with two people doing it, really kind of vibing off each other, and it shifted the whole play, because we had done it multiple times with different people doing different parts, and each time somebody executed a different part in a different way that was great. And so that was the last two pieces that it was like, oh no, it's there, it just needs the right combination for the parents.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. We're going to time out in a couple of minutes here. So in the last couple of minutes, I really, really hope not only does this make the leap to the audio play, but I want to actually see this in conventional theater as well. Like once we're back into conventional theaters, because #box seats, I look forward to people being able to hear it or see it. It's a fascinating story. I wish we had time to go into that because I had a lot of questions. It is a Los Angeles story. You really skewer a lot of the tropes. You're talking about a lot of the tropes and about Los Angeles, and not just who this kind of nuclear family is of these adult kids, son and daughter, and these older parents. But yeah, that's a whole other kind of like psychological landscape in and of itself. That we'll have to go into in another conversation, because we literally are in our last minute. So Blaine, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much. I want to tell everybody before we time out, because we are going to time out shortly, please go visit the Afro-Existential Podcast. Please listen to Dead Weight. Please go to Amazon and purchase Shady. Do all of these things in the next 24 hours.
Yes.
You will be happy because it's going to bring a lot of joy to your life, and you're going to learn a lot too. The podcast it's educational as well as
share
extremely,
and
share it. And I will be posting all of these links when we post this episode. I'll be posting all the links. So once again, Mr. Blaine Sparks-Teamer, thank you. I so appreciate you being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we will see you next time.
All right. Bye.